There we go. Meeting recording in progress. Excellent. So hi, everybody. Welcome to today's early literacy chat. It is October 14th, and at least where I am, it is a drizzly kind of afternoon. Hopefully everybody is staying warm wherever they happen to be. My name is Samantha Blankart, and I am the Early Literacy Outreach Librarian. I work both for the Alaska State Library and also for Anchorage Public Library. So I'm here in Anchorage today. And today's Early Literacy Chat is going to be talking all about storytime assessment, which will include self-reflection, peer sharing, observation, those kinds of things. And we'll also be talking about project outcome and how you can use it for your different library programs and for reports. The content for today's chat is based off of a module from the Supercharged Storytimes for All course that is available through WebJunction and OCLC if you wanted a lot more detail than what we'll go into today. So let's get started. There we go. So assessment and evaluation are terms that are often used interchangeably. Today, we're making a distinction. Assessment for our purposes is an ongoing process of understanding and revision. It's formative and it's focused on the process. Evaluation is instead a more finite appraisal of a product. It is comprehensive and it's focused on an end product of some kind. So we'll be looking at structures, tools, and methods that allow us to improve the impact of our programs, particularly when we're talking about our story times. Views 2 was the first systematic study of story times done to date and was conducted by the University of Washington's iSchool. And when the Views 2 researchers interviewed public librarians and administrators, it was found that many agreed that using assessment to understand the impact of a story time is valuable both to the storytime provider and to the public library as a tool to use for advocacy. So assessments allow a storytime practitioner to improve their programs and the services that they offer. However, many of them also had concerns about the assessment itself. So what is being assessed and how is it being assessed? They may also not know how to conduct an assessment. So some storytime practitioners will avoid assessment also because they don't want to feel judged or they don't want to be compared to another librarian or storytime provider, either at their location or within their system or a neighboring system. So here are 3 types of assessment, which we'll look at in more depth. Self-reflection, which is the giving of considered thought to how your story time went, what went well, what you might change. Peer sharing, which is sharing ideas with colleagues who may or may not be other youth services professionals. And peer observation, so that's getting feedback from anybody who might be observing your story time. You can find the process and tools that work for you and your preference. There's no one-size-fits-all with assessment, and you might find that you use different tools at different times, and it just depends on where you are in your stages. And so there's lots of flexibility here with assessment. So here we are seeing the storytime cycle. We are planning our story times, hopefully with intentionality, especially related to those different early literacy components that are very important that we know about. And so then we are planning them, we are delivering them, and then we will be reflecting on what worked and what we might change. And that's kind of in that assessment part there. And that assessment will then influence our future planning and delivery and so on. It's just a big sort of never-ending cycle. That isn't to say that assessment couldn't take place during your planning and delivery phases as well, but more often it is something that's done after you've delivered a program. So our first type of assessment we'll talk about in more detail is self-reflection. Self-reflection can be a powerful tool to help you understand if your story time is achieving the goals that you've set. Self-reflection at its best allows you to take a step back and think about what you've done previously, both what has worked really well, what maybe not worked so well, how to improve and grow that story time practice. Self-reflection can be done even if there's nobody else in your library who does story times. So I have a question for the group. You can type your answers in the chat. You can unmute yourself and share. But I just want to ask you right now, how are you self-reflecting with your story times? Not hearing anybody or seeing anything coming up in the chat. Oh, there we go. Hard to do with limited feedback from online audiences. Yep, I can understand that, Sarah. Not doing story time myself, but in the past, I always made notes. That's great. Yeah, so there's no there's no wrong answers here. Some things that we've heard in the past. Ooh, story times on local public radio. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, so some things we've maybe have heard in the past is that people are comparing their story times to what they are expecting they might have happened or would have done. Um, they might compare themselves with other storytime providers. See, I see something else from Keela in the chat. Keeping an Excel sheet that lists the things I've read and notes on how different books work and don't work. Ooh, that's a really good idea. I like that one. Let's see, some other examples we've had in the past are looking at websites and blogs and YouTube for different ideas. Keeping a journal, which is kind of like Keelan's idea with the Excel spreadsheet. Audience reactions too from Sarah. Yes, that's another good one. You can definitely tell if the people in the room with you have enjoyed and gotten something from the story time. There we go. Love it. So I think you guys are all doing a pretty good job so far on self-reflecting. I've liked a lot of these ideas. So self-reflection can be a very powerful tool that like we can help you understand your story time, as we said. But some tools that you can use when self-reflecting are listed here on the slide. So you don't have to use these kinds of tools if you don't want to, but they can be a helpful guide. There are a couple of worksheets that were created for the Supercharged Storytimes program, but can still work just fine even if you have not taken any of the Supercharged classes. So here we have our interactivity self-reflection worksheet, the early literacy planning tool worksheet. So this one was designed more for the intentionality aspect of a story time, but you can sort of use it in conjunction of like, did you meet those goals? Were you able um, to direct people toward tips or things like that that related back to early literacy? And then there's also a story time self-reflection worksheet as well. And you can also post in different library groups and share your experiences with others, which is related to that peer sharing, but it's more like if you're just saying, this is what I've done, and sort of like writing it out, and sometimes just having another person see it or having some kind of, I wouldn't say like a monitor or a guide, but just kind of some kind of accountability that somebody else is paying attention as well. So it could be something like the ACLA listserv, it could be the Alaska Storytime Leaders Facebook group, something like that. So here's just an example of that self-reflection worksheet. Hopefully it's not too small to see. When the recording gets posted on the State Library website, I will be linking these forms out so that you can download them and use them on your own. And so while we often informally assess our story times, not everybody's going to write down their thoughts, but I find that if I can put my thoughts into words by writing them or typing them out, it can be pretty valuable. Sort of collect my thoughts and organize them, but it can also be a way to sort of track your progress over time. If you do this maybe once a quarter and you can see if you have met your personal goals, if you've improved, if you've been able to um, connect with families in a way that works for your own location. So let's now look at another part of assessment, which is that peer sharing and observation. So peer sharing is sharing ideas, talking over what worked and what needs some more practice, encouraging one another, and this can be done face-to-face or it can be done digitally. It's building a community of practice, like a learning community. And peer sharing is a collaborative way to approach a storytime assessment. So, peer sharing, just like self reflection, can be done throughout the storytime cycle that we saw earlier, that planning, delivery, assessment cycle. For example, in the planning stage, maybe you had tried a movement activity with toddlers that was going along with a book, and you either saw, if you were back in the face to face times, or you heard from families later that it may have been too difficult for them to do. So you might ask a colleague for some different ideas. You might share ideas on how to keep adults off their cell phones during story time, or get suggestions on how to develop an early literacy tip that connects with your families. Or perhaps you're looking for some new books that will sort of perk up and add some spice to your old standby favorites. In the delivery phase, a colleague could observe your story time and offer feedback, which is kind of what we'll talk about a bit more with the peer observation as well. You can also use a partner to help you practice different early literacy tips. So when it's your turn to observe a story time that somebody else presents, there are several things that you can look for to offer helpful feedback. Things like, is the presenter being interactive? Are they having meaningful connections with the children and their caregivers? Are they incorporating any early literacy strategies? What do we think went well? What might we offer as a suggestion? So there is also a peer observation worksheet. Again, this is one that will be linked online with the recording, so you can look at this one in more detail. And this, again, like I said, is a tool that you can use. It is available to you, but you don't have to. I'm not going to just show up at your library someday and demand to see your forms. But it is there if you feel like you would like it to use it, or, just give it a try. So I'm going to attempt now to have us watch a short video on how to give feedback to a partner in a positive way. The storytime provider is on the left. Her name is Gilda. And then we have her colleague Elaine on the right, who's just observed her storytime. And in this video, you hopefully see a lot of give and take and support. And even though you can't see it from here, Gilda has filled out a self-reflection worksheet and Elaine has done a peer observation worksheet. So hopefully this will play. Whoop. No. But smart me put the link here, so let's see if we can get it to go. Sorry, I'm still getting used to WebEx. Sorry, everybody. Technical difficulties. Okay. Oh, fun. Okay. Can people see the web browser with the YouTube up? Yes. Okay. Great. Whew. I love technology. It's amazing. So let's go ahead and play this little video. It's just, as you can see, about 2 minutes. Actually, can people hear it? I just realized I'm hearing it in my... Yes. That's the other problem. I just realized I was hearing it in my headphones, but I don't know how to make the sound. Okay, you know what? I'm going to put the link in the chat, and then I encourage you guys to watch it after this presentation. I'm sorry about this, and hopefully I will figure out a better way to do that in the future. Okay. Thanks, Sarah. Okay. Yes, it's a nice video. I really like it because it's just, like I said before, it's just showing a way to talk about things with another person in a positive way. Because we never want um, our suggestions or anything to come off in a negative, harsh critiquing sort of way. We want it to stay positive because, of course, people, just like children that we know, they learn better when it's positive, positive reinforcement, everything like that. So that's a bummer, but either way. So let's have another little example discussion part again. So let's say we are observing the story time of another practitioner. Um, this again would be back in the ye old times when we could all be there in person. And we are noticing that they're not really doing anything interactive with the children. So how could we provide them with some positive feedback that would help them, but that would be heard as constructive and not critical? Feel free to post your thoughts in chat, or you can um, unmute yourself and just share with the group if you like.
Samantha, this is Sarah. Can you?
It's a bit choppy. I'm not sure if I can hear you well, Sarah.
Okay. And yours is a little bit choppy for me. I'll put it in the text. But I just wondered, do you mean providing feedback in the midst of the story time or after the story time?
This would be after.
Well, just from my experience, if nothing interactive is happening, I think I would kind of start by talking about, whether or not the presenter felt like they got good engagement from the kids, and then kind of lead into a discussion of ways that we might change that from there. So kind of helping them self-reflect, and then lead into possible solutions.
That sounds great. I'm seeing Keelan in the chat is pairing negative with positive observations, or sort of, I guess, offering a constructive way to go forward, saying, like, I noticed this, but you also did this that was great. Hopefully that's what you meant, Keelan. You can correct me if I'm off base. Exactly. Okay, great. Does anyone else have any thoughts they'd like to share about ways they could give constructive feedback? Okay. Not seeing anything else pop up, but that's totally fine. So, to keep keep your feedback positive, we are going to start by focusing on strengths, which is kind of related to what Keelan was talking about with that positive observations there. So if we're focusing on their strengths, you could say, like, oh, you were really expressive when you were reading the story with the kids. Expressive could be their voice or their hand gestures or any way that they're making the story instead of just a flat monotone voice. And then we want to focus more on the situation at hand, what we specifically observed. It's not about the storytime provider personally. It's just about the situation that we're in. So you could say something like, well, I noticed that there were some points in the story when it would be really fun to get the children involved. And then we need to be specific with our feedback, because everyone has room for growth and improvement, but they need something specific to work on instead of just a general vague idea. So if we're continuing with our positive feedback, we could just give them a specific example. Say, for example, you could ask the children to say the rhyming words along with you. And then we can, of course, give any other comments on things that we see that might be improved. So this one's kind of like what Sarah was saying, where it's kind of leading them into that self-reflection. We can ask, what kind of planning are you already doing? Is there anything we can think of that could help you remember to do XYZ specific feedback that we gave? And again, the whole goal here is to keep it positive, but to share something specific that's about the situation, and it's not about the person who's doing it. The only time I would ever say if it's about the person is if they are probably the kind of person who shouldn't be in a room with children at all because they're just angry or yelling, or it's just not working out because there's a personality clash. But most of the time, if you're working in youth services, you're not that kind of a person. Hopefully. I don't know. So the worksheets that we've seen before, that self-reflection worksheet and the peer observation worksheet, they work together as a basis for a conversation or feedback. So while we may be talking with our colleagues informally about our story times, and we will get feedback from parents and caregivers who are in attendance at our story time, there is additional value in the considered conversation that can result from more formal planning. So when we, both a storytime provider and a storytime observer, take the time to write down our thoughts with a focused consideration, we will be getting a richer experience out of it than just thinking it over or casually verbalizing it. And we may not be able to do this kind of formal writing everything down very often. We have tons of other things we have to do during the week, especially right now. So even if you can manage this 2 to 3 times a year, even once a quarter, it can be very helpful. And, the very process of explaining what we have done and why is going to strengthen that intentionality in our story times, which will really make them more powerful and more of a learning experience for the kids. So assessment, in whatever forms it takes, can be a powerful element of our story times to continue to grow and to improve those story times. What I want to talk about now is a specific tool that is available for all librarians to use with story times and other library programs as well, and it is Project Outcome. Have you guys heard of Project Outcome before? Hopefully some of you. Right. So if you have not yet heard of Project Outcome, it is a free toolkit that is designed to help public libraries understand and share the impact of their programs and services by providing simple surveys and an easy-to-use process for measuring and analyzing outcomes. Project Outcome also provides libraries with resources and training support needed to apply those results and to advocate for their library's future, especially in pretty uncertain funding times. And right now, they have nearly 150,000 surveys collected into their system so far from thousands of public libraries across the US and Canada. So it allows you to compare your data from your local library to similar library programs across North America, which is pretty darn cool. So, why would we use Project Outcome? Well, for years, libraries are gauging their success through different anecdotes and patron stories. And the core metric has been how often people are coming back for more or how many books people are checking out. But as you know, times have changed, and so have libraries. So just using our librarians' intuition or anecdotes or our attendance counts at programs are no longer really enough. And so to demonstrate the value of your library to your community, you need more data and evidence. And so adding this kind of outcome data to your evaluation process is going to help you answer a key question, which is what good did we do in our community? The Project Outcome Toolkit helps libraries quickly and easily capture snapshot data. So it's not a tool for rigorous data collection and random sampling or anything. You are targeting your users and you're finding out what they're gaining and what else they may need from the library to support them in their child's early learning sort of journey, I guess. Their surveys are usually short, they're pretty simple, so it's not going to confuse your patrons. The length of it shouldn't scare them off, so you should be able to increase that response rate from a patron. And the questions on the surveys are pretty open-ended. And so you're really able to get an insight into your community's wants and needs because they're able to sort of share whatever they want with you. And so that key benefit of using Project Outcome for your evaluations is that you're using a standardized outcome measure that can be used across time. It can be done at multiple branches, a variety of different kinds of programs. And so while each type of program you might offer to your families of like the under 5 crowd, it might be different from each other, the evaluation can be tracked across the board. So what do we mean by outcomes? The Public Library Association defines outcomes as a specific benefit that a patron receives from a library program or service. And this can be quantitative or qualitative, and all of them are expressed as a change that an individual perceives in themselves. An outcome is a way to determine the extent to which a program achieved its intended results. And so by measuring outcomes, we are learning what changes or effects or impacts our programs are having within our community. So did our program positively impact the lives of patrons? Did it make a difference? Are their lives better as a result of attending this program? Storytime outcomes capture how much caregivers are learning new techniques to help their children become ready to learn in school. And it is it's good to capture this kind of data. It's great for a broad range of different library goals. So while we're already presenting, I'm sure, all great library story times, measuring these kinds of outcomes and having that data could help you understand if there's an area where you might need a bit more strengthening. So or perhaps that your library could expand their reach or strengthen community level literacy goals through a partnership or a new funding stream. If you've measured these outcomes, you have the data to reinforce your message about how important your story times are to those attendees. And if you've got early childhood literacy goals that you're trying to reach, you can use this outcome data to measure against those goals and see if you're getting there. So having this outcome data, like I said, it helps librarians to improve the programs they offer and gives you the information that you need to share with community partners, different funding agencies, different grant programs. Oh, sorry, I got my notes written here. And Project Outcome also provides different built-in reports so that you can easily share the findings that you see with your library board, your friends of the library groups. You can also add in and include any patron comments that you receive. And now you can easily capture all that data in one place so that you can share it with community members or business owners, which again is communicating your library's value in your community. So the specific survey that we recommend that you use if you're doing story times or other programs for kids under the age of 5 or 6 is this early childhood literacy survey. And as part of Project Outcome, which you all do because you are working in libraries in Alaska, you will have access to this standardized early childhood literacy survey. So the questions that are on it are pre-populated through a template for you, and they are standardized so that you can collect this data consistently and that libraries across the state are collecting the same kind of data so that we can compare and collocate all of that good stuff. So the outcomes measured in this survey capture caregiver reported changes in knowledge, confidence, behavior around early literacy topics, and awareness of the library resources that are related to early childhood literacy. There are also there's two open-ended questions that ask your patrons what the library is doing well and what can be improved. This survey takes probably about 5 minutes to complete, unless they want to share a lot of thoughts with you, and then they have the opportunity to use more. So there is a template, and then you use that template to create your own library's personalized survey. And as part of doing that, you could add some additional questions if you wanted to that were specific for your library, but you don't need to. The survey was, of course, originally intended to be done during an in-person program, either with having people fill it out on paper and then having a staff member put that data into Project Outcome manually, or you could have had it maybe on a tablet or other device. But Project Outcome creates a link to your survey, and so you can share that survey online. You could put it in the comment section or the description of a Facebook Live story time, or it can be something that you can share via a newsletter to families who may have attended the program. So to get started using and exploring Project Outcome, all you have to do is go to projectoutcome.org. There are a couple of videos that they have created which show you how to create an account and how to get started, which, let's see if there's an easy way for me to put those in the, ooh, that's not what I wanted to do, shoot. Put those guys in the chat for you, and these of course will be also available in when we have the recording up. We'll have these links as well. I love these videos. They are much higher budget than I could ever do, but they really make it easy to get started and to get going in Project Outcome. And like I said, the fact that you work in a library in Alaska mean that you should be able to create an account and get started right away. If you have any issues creating an account, let me know. I have, it's not necessarily administrator level privileges, but I can make sure that your library is listed as a library under the state of Alaska, and that should allow you to start making surveys. So, let's see. Oh, wanted to say, it may seem a little bit nebulous right now and weird, but I promise you, once you actually get in there and start poking around, it's going to be much, much clearer and much easier to do. So there's going to be a big button there that says, create a survey essentially. And so you just choose the early childhood literacy one and you're doing it immediately, and it just walks you through the whole process. The easiest path to getting started measuring using Project Outcome is just to pick a program and just measure once and just start. If you are doing a program that has is over a series, there's multiple different days, maybe it's like 3 weeks back to back or something like that, you can always direct people to the survey when you're completely done. But you can also plan to do a survey during a regular or recurring program. Just try to pick a time when you have a lot of people who are attending, just so that you can get a larger data set. If you want to capture changes in patrons' learning from beginning to end of a program series, you can, of course, measure twice. So once after your first program and then again after the last in the series. If you have regular programs and you want to capture feedback from different groups of patrons, you're going to have to run surveys several times over the month on different days of the week when you're likely to have a different crowd of attendees at your programs. So you're already doing a lot to prepare for delivering successful story times, but just a little bit more pre-planning will help you to ensure that you're going to get good responses from caregivers with these project outcome surveys. In the before times with in-person programs, using a paper survey would lower the barrier for caregivers that might have very little time or attention span to fill out a survey, because they can see that it all fits on one page. It's very short, quick to fill out. If your library had used an iPad or some other tablet, if you only had one or two, caregivers might not be willing to wait around to complete the survey. But like I said, now with our virtual story times, it's so easy to get this survey out to folks because you can just give them a link right wherever your patrons are tuning in. So if you're doing it on Facebook Live or some other platform, you can have the link right there. If you are doing it more on the radio, you may have to get a bit more creative. It could go out in a newsletter. It could be something on a blog or a homepage, something where families are going to see your library's program offerings for children. And the other thing is to try and explain the why. Why are we taking these kinds of surveys? It might seem obvious to us, why we want to capture this kind of data, but it's not going to seem obvious to caregivers. So if we can explain to them why we want them to complete these surveys, we can help drive responses and get better feedback. So an example could be something like, the library wants your feedback so that we can continue to improve the programs we offer to you. Or the library relies on your feedback so that we can communicate the value of this activity to our partners or our board or the assembly or whatever community organization sort of makes the rules in your local area. And of course, those are just some examples of how to explain the why, so you can customize that kind of language to whatever works for your community needs. But what I've heard is that when libraries explain the why, the patrons and those caregivers, they see themselves as a partner in improving library programming. So just picture how you'd like to use the data throughout the process. And while the project outcome data does get aggregated for larger learning needs, there's a lot that you could do personally with what you collect. So like I said, you can talk to your board about your work and the results. You can use it to determine if you're meeting those literacy goals that might be in part of your strategic plan. But regardless of what you plan to do with the data, just plan to use it for something because it's going to be helpful for you. All right. So that was a lot. I know. Thank you guys so much for coming today and listening to this early literacy chat all about Storytime assessment and other program assessment. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them now. If you think of any in the future, you can always shoot me an email at ready@muni.org or give me a call. My phone number is up there on the screen. Yeah, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them now. Well, you're welcome. Let's see, are there any surveys built for very small story times? Typically get 1 to 2 families a week. I mean, you can use the project outcome surveys for smaller groups. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. It's just if you wanted to get good variety in your data, it'd be good if you did it on a day when you had a bigger group. But there's no reason to not measure if you're getting smaller groups, because it's still going to help you track things over time and collect good data. Sure. Any other questions from folks? Okay, not seeing anything else. But again, like I mentioned, if you think of anything you'd like to add or ask me later, you can always email me at ready@muni.org, and I'm also available for any other early literacy related questions or things, comments you might have. But thank you guys again for coming out, and hopefully you stay warm wherever it is you are.